Optimism at Obama's security summit as pledges are made to cut stockpiles of nuclear material. Together again, Armenian and Turkish leaders meet to try to restart their roadmap to better relations. Poland continues to mourn its lost leaders as investigators seek answers from the doomed plane's black box. And Manchester City and Togo striker Emmanuel Adebayor is to quit playing international soccer.
President of Ukraine.
Ukraine is to get rid of its stockpile of highly enriched uranium by the year 2012. The decision by President Viktor Yanukovych was the first tangible result from the 47-nation summit in Washington aimed at preventing nuclear terrorism. The move is designed to make it harder for groups such as Al-Qaeda to get hold of fissile material that could be used to make an atomic bomb. Ukraine's agreement sets a precedent that summit host President Barack Obama wants other countries to follow. Both the US and Russia are leading by example. President Dmitry Medvedev and Obama are to sign a deal today to dispose of 34 tons of weapons-grade plutonium. Although not officially on the agenda, Obama is also trying to get a united international response to Iran's nuclear activities. His drive for tougher sanctions gained momentum after China's leader, President Hu Jintao, said his government would help craft a UN resolution. The spirit of cooperation between Washington and Beijing is in marked contrast to the last few months when disagreements over Tibet and their country's fractious economic relations have prevailed. Taking advantage of both being in Washington for the nuclear summit, the leaders of Armenia and Turkey have met to try and breathe new life into efforts to improve ties. The get-together between President Serge Sarkisyan and Turkey's Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan follows months of little progress since agreeing in principle to open their border. Last October, under the auspices of the US, the two countries signed accords which should lead to the normalising of relations and thus hopefully end a century of hostility. But the protocol need parliamentary ratification, which neither side has yet sought. The deal would bring big economic gains to landlocked Armenia and would improve Turkey's credentials as a potential EU member.
Polish student groups have been paying their respects in Warsaw. An official memorial service has been arranged for Saturday, exactly 1 week after the plane crash in which 96 people died, including President Lech Kaczynski. His funeral will be held on Sunday. Thousands of stunned Poles continue to absorb the shock of losing almost an entire generation of the country's ruling elite. Presidential elections had been due by the end of June when Kaczynski was to have sought a fresh mandate. Will that now be left to his twin brother?
Two possibilities. One is that he will run as the candidate, which part of the supporters of the party expects him to do. And the other equally likely solution is that he might totally withdraw from politics. And I don't believe the latter one, but it is a possibility. And finally, they might find another candidate which will have a very, very short term to persuade the voters to vote for him.
Although the vote will now be left as long as possible, Poland's moved to fill key state posts. Most of the presidential chancellery was wiped out by the crash. And while 3 deputy ministers will need to be replaced, Poland's government has reassured the people it will continue to function.
Polish investigators are to analyse the plane's black boxes to see whether there's any truth in suggestions that pressure was put on the pilots to land in bad weather. In 2008, there were reports that President Kaczynski ordered a pilot to land in Tbilisi during Georgia's war with Russia. Poland's chief prosecutor says there's no evidence at the moment of similar pressure. In the inquiry, we'll work out an opinion based on the sound recordings to listen to what was said in the background of the conversations in the plane. We want to know if there was pressure put on the pilots by third parties. We must establish all the circumstances. Russia has said the pilot ignored advice from air traffic controllers not to land at Slomensk. The delegation was on its way there to commemorate the massacre of Poles at Katyn during World War II. In Moscow, relatives of the victims have begun identifying the bodies. That of the president's wife, Maria, identified thanks to an engraved ring, is expected to be flown home today. The identification process is expected to last 3 to 4 days.
Angry Afghans block the main road out of Kandahar in protest at the killing of 4 civilians after foreign forces reportedly opened fire on a local bus. 18 other passengers were wounded in the incident, some of them seriously. Witnesses said an American military convoy fired on the vehicle when it drew up close in the west of Kandahar city. NATO has launched an investigation. The issue of civilian casualties caused by international troops who are meant to protect them is undermining support for their presence in the country. It's also caused a rift between the Afghan president and the West. Last year, more than 2,500 non-combatants were killed, making it the deadliest 12 months of the 8-year war. NATO's top commander in Afghanistan has issued strict orders to his troops to try to reduce the number of civilian deaths.
Anti-government protesters in Thailand like these outside the Prime Minister's home have reason to celebrate after 2 influential players in the country's affairs backed their cause. The Election Commission has recommended that the ruling party be dissolved, while the head of the army has said the same should happen to Parliament. If the issue can't be resolved through political means, he said, then dissolution has to come. The army plays an important role in Thai politics, but the general said he was getting too involved. What happens next is up to the politicians, he said. I only want peace. Such words crank up the pressure on Hapisit Wechacheva. The Prime Minister was seen as having the army's backing. He came to power after a military coup. The Electoral Commission's ruling finding his party guilty of misusing donations is also a concern. All this is welcome news for the anti-government protesters days after the clashes that killed 21 people in the worst political violence in Thailand since 1992. The Red Shirts brought the case before the Commission. In the past, its decisions have brought down several governments. Some other news in brief. Officials in Rio have begun demolishing homes at risk from flooding and landslides. They've started work in one shanty town. At least 8 will be evacuated and destroyed this week. More than 2,500 families are to be moved from their hillside homes. Local churches and samba schools have been sheltering people since the recent heavy rains and landslides. 3 months after the earthquake in Haiti, the government is stepping up the forced evacuation of dozens of makeshift camps set up on private ground, much to the dismay of the UN, which is worried about the impact of the rainy season. 7,000 people have been moved from a stadium. Thousands more have been told to leave a school. Panic in the Peruvian Andes as a swollen river devastated homes and farms. About 5 towns were drenched by tides of mud, scaring many people and reportedly causing at least 3 deaths. It was caused by a melting glacier, part of which fell into a lagoon.
The Beatles. This rock and roll group has taken over as the kingpins of musical appreciation among elements.
More than 40 years after John Lennon said the Beatles were more popular than Jesus, the Vatican has given the Fab Four its blessing. The official newspaper of the Roman Catholic Church has absolved the British bad boys for their wild ways and credits them for their achievements.
L'Osservatore Romano commentò che
The Osservatore Romano commented that in reality it wasn't that scandalous, because the fascination with Jesus was so great that it attracted these new heroes of the time.
Questi nuovi eroi del tempo.
But this unexpected praise isn't the first time the church has recognised the Beatles. Earlier this year, their Revolver album topped the Vatican's all-time top 10. What would John Lennon have thought?